Ashley, what do you think about the decision for New Line Cinema to spoil the return of Gandalf in the trailers and the marketing for The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers?
It's something of a travesty. There's actually a couple things in this movie that they changed that I think are almost cardinal sins among a franchise and a movie that I love.
I'm specifically I know the book fans we always knew Gandalf was coming back for book fans.
40-year-old spoiler.
But I think if you came to this movie fresh and you saw that trailer, it's a huge plot point that's being spoiled there.
I just have to say that Ian McKellen is a treasure, and I understand wanting to assure people that they are going to get their money's worth, and he is coming back.
That they're going to get the full McKellen-sance?
But I think if you didn't know, the reveal would have been quite something.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to get this Geek History Lesson in session. Hello, and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Needs Caller ID for all these guest call-ins. Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or all-time great movie from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about them in about an hour. And this is an episode that I have looked forward to all year.
This week we are talking about the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Last week we did Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Last week?
Last year. It feels like last week.
It does feel like last week.
It feels like last week. And I want to give a quick shout out to Ryan Rains for suggesting my middle name on this episode. If you're a longtime listener of the pod, you know I gain a new middle name each and every episode because my parents didn't give me one. And
drag that.
And if you'd like to suggest a middle name for me going forward, email us at geekhistorylesson@gmail.com with the subject line middle name. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, it's the 20th anniversary. This movie's 20 years old. We did Fellowship last year or last week, so depending on some guests or who you're talking to. Now we're doing Two Towers, and now we have a special guest who I believe is also 20 years old, the exact age of this movie. I'm pretty certain he was born the day this movie came out. He saw it in theaters on the day of his birth. It's a fantastic story.
That's quality parenting.
We have our own GHL research assistant and talented writer himself, Diego Nunez, joining the pod. Welcome to the pod, Diego.
Hey, you guys. Thank you for having me.
What was it like seeing this movie in theaters on the day of your birth?
It was unreal. I mean, I just, my sisters, they both loved it. They saw it the Fellowship the year before, and they were just like, Mom, we got to take this baby boy to go see The Two Towers. It's a must need.
It must be the first thing he experiences in his human existence.
He's blind. He doesn't know what shapes are. We have to indoctrinate him into the power of the hobbits.
All I saw was the beautiful white wizard that is Gandalf the White. And it was just, just like when the hobbits see them. And it's just like, oh, no, I'm sorry. Legolas and Aragorn and everybody. It's just, it was just luminous. I have that distinct memory as a baby.
Diego was the only one unspoiled because he hadn't seen the trailer.
That's right. Exactly. Well, I was going to say, Diego, what do you think about that, man? What do you think about them, New Line Cinema, spoiling? That's the thing I'm gonna hold New Line Cinema, now Warner Brothers, to task that they spoiled the White Wizard in every trailer of The Two Towers. What do you think about good decision, bad decision?
I'm of two minds because for me, it was interesting for real talk. I was about a teenager when these movies were coming out. I was in middle school. So every year I was in middle school, we were getting a new Lord of the Rings movie. And I came in this was actually my first Lord of the Rings movie. I experienced this in theaters, and Fellowship I saw on DVD. So I was actually telling half truth with my sisters. They saw Fellowship, they loved it, they bought the DVD, and then they showed it to me, and I fell in love with it. And so I had no inkling about the trailers or anything of what was going on. I kind of went in this very blindly of not knowing what was going on. So it's interesting now that you guys are bringing this up about the trailers spoiling everything. And I guess, it's sad that 20 years later, nothing's really changed because you always got to put in the best parts to lure in the audience for the next follow-up, right? So it's kind of a shame, but I mean, I guess if you got to do what you got to do to try to reel in the audience, right, to have them come back for more.
Well, speaking of reeling on the audience, we should keep this episode moving. And let's get to the 10-cent origin. Ashley, what is that?
That is the first part of the podcast where Professor Jason is going to give you all the basic who's its and what's its galore of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Of course, this movie was directed by massive Beatles fan Peter Jackson, has a screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, Stephen Sinclair, and Peter Jackson. It was based on The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I think he's a not well-known author. I don't know. I'm not
super
certain about
indie,
yeah,
known in academia.
Not that famous. Anyways, it was released, of course, in the United States on the 18th of December in 2002. Had a running time of 179 minutes. Had a budget of $94 million and went on to make $947 million, almost $1 billion.
In 2002.
In 2002.
Not too shabby.
Well, think about it. When you barely spent $100 million, that's a hell of a rate of return on that.
Yeah.
Let's get to the meet cute.
Yes, that is the second part of the podcast where we are all going to tell you the first time we meeted this movie and how cute it was.
Now, Diego, did we just hear your meet cute, basically? Your sister's introducing you with the DVD and all that jazz.
Yeah, that is more or less my meet cute. Yeah, because this was, like I mentioned earlier, this was my first Lord of the Rings movie in theaters,
Ashley, what is your meet cute for this movie?
My meet cute is actually incredibly similar to Diego's. So I told this on Fellowship, so I'll tell a retracted version of it, but I had not seen Fellowship in theaters because I thought it would be too scary because I'm a delicate flower. And I saw it the summer we were moving on DVD, and I was like, this is the greatest thing. This was created just for me. My whole life makes sense now. And it became my favorite thing. I read all the books and had started Silmarillion by the time this movie came out. And my daddy took me to go see it on opening night because he had read the books and kind of liked fantasy. And my mom said, I am not going to go see no elves do nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's one of my fondest memories. I think I saw this 5 times in the theaters. If you think that's a lot, wait till I tell you how many times I saw Return of the King next year in theaters.
Next week, you mean?
No. Next week. And one of the times I saw this, I saw it with my very best friend, Lisa Lee, in theaters because we were both huge Lord of the Rings fans. And this is one of the movies that I have a very distinct memory of having to go to the bathroom and being like, I cannot, I will not, I refuse, I am strong. When is the spider showing up? What is happening?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
How'd you make it through this one?
You cross your legs, you do a dance, etc., etc.
Little hobbit dance.
Yeah. How about you, Jason?
So I saw this movie on the night it came out with my younger sister because I had seen Fellowship in theaters. It was funny because I've talked about the story last year where Harry Potter 1, the first movie, and Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, both came out in the same year. Mm-hmm. And I remember there sort of being like this groundswell of fantasy. Now, I saw Two Towers in theaters, and at the time I had a girlfriend who loved Fellowship of the Ring. So I will be flat honest. When I went...
Was I your girlfriend in 2002?
No. But she watched The Fellowship of the Rings. I think I saw it 20 times in between seeing Two Towers. So I wasn't that jazzed about this movie.
Oh, no.
But I will tell you that in between these two movies is when I read all 3 Lord of the Rings books for the first time. So I knew what was basically going to happen. Now, here is the other part of this meet cute. There is also another movie that came out this same exact weekend.
Only to be decimated by the Lord of the Rings.
A big franchise, too. And one of my favorite franchises. This same weekend, Star Trek Nemesis, the final Star Trek movie featuring the Next Generation cast, Captain Picard.
Featuring Tom Hardy.
Featuring a young Tom Hardy as Shinzon, premiered. So I saw Two Towers, I think, on Friday, and I saw Star Trek Nemesis on Sunday. And when I went into Star Trek Nemesis theater, it was a ghost town. It was me and my sister, 2 other people. Two Towers decimated Nemesis. And I cannot believe that Paramount Pictures thought they had any chance, especially with how big Fellowship went. When you were recently born, Diego, did your family also take you to see Star Trek Nemesis?
We did not see that one. But it's funny because I do remember that. I do remember the posters for that. As a small day-old infant.
It was something like a generation's final journey or something was the tagline.
Yeah. That's wild. I didn't connect the two.
Little did they know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. We're going to dive into the History 101 section. We're going to get deep into the Two Towers, or high. We're going to climb the Two Towers, and we're going to have a great conversation. And if you want more conversations like this, you need to check out this week's Geek History Lesson Extra episode on Patreon. It is the best movie sequels, because we're talking about Two Towers being a movie sequel. We're talking about more sequels. It's a lot like this, except we curse. We're going to make Diego curse. Head on over to patreon.com/Jawiin and join there to get more podcasts like Jason and Jeremy John about Justice League. We'll review every episode of the Justice League animated series. You get 4 bonus episodes, GHL Extra, Marvel Club, all kinds of stuff, and ad-free episodes of Geek History Lesson. Come on over and join us. Thanks to all the super friends that do. Now we're going to talk about some Two Towers. Ashley.
Yes.
You're a big fan of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes.
This is a sequel.
Yes.
Sequel to the Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Did you, from your memory,
yes,
was there any worry that this was not going to live up to the expectations of the first movie, Fellowship of the Ring?
Oh, I was a child. I didn't know movies could devastate you.
That's fair.
No, I was like, you're going to give me more of Viggo Mortensen, who I don't know if I want to be my dad or my boyfriend. Like, yes, of course. I had absolutely no doubt that this was going to be amazing. I'd actually like to ask a question to both of you, and it's mostly me being rude. Can either of you name the Two Towers?
Diego, do you want? I have a strong guess on this.
I know the location. I don't think it's the same, right? It's not Isengard, right?
Okay, so the tower is.
Wait, no, I got.
Okay.
Let me just throw this out there.
Okay.
As this is my stupidest claim to fame. I'm just going to say this.
Oh boy!
As a former Collider Showdown movie trivia champion, it is Orthanc.
That's right, in Isengard.
And Minas Morgul.
No.
That's what it is in the movies.
It's not.
That's what it is in the movies.
It's not. Minas Morgul is the name of the like the city, like Minas Tirith. Barad-dûr is the name of the tower.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So, but Orthanc is the name of the tower in Isengard.
Oh, interesting. So, okay. So it's funny, Ashley, because I actually have a piece of trivia here about the Two Towers here.
Uh-huh.
And it actually said that Tolkien never named which Two Towers he was talking about.
No,
and,
this is movie canon.
When Tolkien considered several possible sets of towers, he eventually created a final cover illustration and wrote a note at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring that identified them as somewhere in Minas Morgul and Orthanc. And then Jackson's films made them Orthanc and Barad-dûr.
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? Barad-dûr. Anyways, so I'm gonna.
But because we're talking about the movie, I wanted to harp on that. Is what it's called in the movie. I was
gonna bring that up. So interesting. Diego, are you in a similar situation where, like, because you were a child, you were just like, this is gonna be great no matter what? I have no expectation that this could possibly be bad.
Yeah. I'm with Ashley on this one. I was at that age where you were just so pure, just being a year old,
fresh newborn, yes.
And like I just was just amazed by what movies were capable of, and just entering into the world and seeing Lord of the Rings and not being disappointed after each movie. You know what I mean? Like it was quite a spectacle to endure those first 3 years.
You sweet summer child.
I was going to say, so Jason, I'm assuming you had some deep doubts in your soul if you're asking.
Of course.
You were like, how could they ever do Rohan?
Well, no, it was not that. It was the fact of the matter that the Fellowship of the Ring was so excellent. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking with, my film buddies in college and all stuff like that, because I was in college.
You would have been at the height of your film snobbery at the time.
Yeah, and we look. And
I mean that with love. We all go through that phase.
I say that with anybody. True. I think most movie fans, like, you have a film snobbery.
Yes. Everybody does.
You have it for comic books, you have it for movies, books, video games, all stuff like that. Yes, this would have been the height of my film snobbery phase. We loved the first one so much and thought it was such an amazing piece of art that I doubted that they could touch it. I was like, oh man, it's because, there is such a thing as the sophomore slump.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the reason why the sophomore slump exists is because when a new piece of art comes out, and the first time you see it, you have no expectations. You've never seen it before.
It's sexy and exciting.
It's never existed. And then when you see the second one, it has to live up to that and then go past it, which for many things is very hard to do. But I will say, I think I did not have that. I think this movie easily surpassed The Fellowship of the Ring.
So your concern was more general. You weren't like, oh, I don't think they can do Rohan. Oh, I don't think they can do Helm's Deep.
I just, in my head, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to feel the same way walking out of this movie the way I felt about Fellowship. I actually went into this movie lowering my expectations because I was like, I have a feeling I'll enjoy it. I have a feeling it'll be good, but I don't think it can ever touch Fellowship of the Ring. And I was happy to say that I felt like The Empire Strikes Back. It surpassed the original. Diego, let's talk about, you're a writer, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, good.
No, Jason, I'm not.
I just wanted to make sure you hadn't, started a new career as an electrical lineman.
I've
Which
been trying,
honestly,
man.
like, you make a bunch of money.
I mean, it pays good money. Just want to say that. It's really good. I've considered it. Anyways, the opening of this film, the first Fellowship of the Ring, very famous for its VO prologue of the 9 rings. And Ashley, can you quote it?
The world is changing.
Yeah, there you go.
I can do the Elvish too if you want.
Give us the taste of the Elvish.
The world is changing.
Oh boy. All right. So Diego, the first movie had this very epic VO prologue. This movie, and I remember walking into this movie being like, how are they going to start this? Are we going to get another prologue? Like, what are they going to do? Or are they just going to start it like we're in media res? This movie starts with a bunch of shots of the New Zealand mountains. And then we hear and then see the Gandalf fighting the Balrog as we zoom into the mountains. What do you think about this choice as the way to open this movie?
So the genius thing I like about all of these movies, and this also goes to Return as well when you guys cover that next year or tomorrow, whenever, next week.
Next week.
Is it sets the tone of exactly what this movie is going to be, right? Like, so with Fellowship, it's heavy exposition, a lot of fantasy, a lot of things to cover, right? And here it's a lot more action oriented, but there's also a somberness to it, because I also love the scene that follows it. Not to jump too far ahead, but
please
it's just
jump.
But the fact that it's a dream, right? So it shows that it's Gandalf.
Yeah,
that it's Gandalf versus Balrog, right? And then it shows Frodo waking up. And like something I wanted to note on that I think is genius about this movie that sets its tone properly is that it's not even flashy with the title card. It just kind of seeps in as it shows Sam and Frodo walking in, and they're just still venturing low on supplies, and it sets this like somber, not depressing, but you know what I mean? There's a tone to it that just kind of sets the mood of what this movie is going to be like. And Return of the King does the same thing, where it perfectly executes by its first scene what it's going to be, you know?
Yeah, this lets you know that this is the first part. Fellowship is very much the adventure, the upswell, the hero's theme. And this is very much like, oh, this is not fun anymore. The danger, like post-death of Gandalf, post-death of Boromir, is really setting in for these characters.
The stakes are real. I think, and I think that's a big reason why I really enjoy this one, is because a lot of this movie is like, yeah, you guys thought this was going to be fun, and it's going to be hard. I also got to say, to your point, Diego, I actually think all 3 of these movies do an excellent job of where they drop their title cards. Like, because the Fellowship of the Ring one is like as over Frodo reading.
Yeah, I love that moment.
Right.
Yeah, and then where's the Return of the King one? I forgot. Is it over Saruman's tower? I think, as they're like riding up.
What's this tower called?
Orthanc?
That's right.
Anyways, so let's talk about the Frodo and the Samwise Gamgee lost in the, I'm going to say this wrong, the Emyn Muil near Mordor. Because we get right into, and I appreciate this, we get right into the Gollum of it all. And Ashley, I have to talk about this because you're a big Gollum fan. You've read the books.
Not a
you
Gollum
love Gollum.
fan.
It's your favorite character.
I don't like.
I know it's your favorite character.
I am not a Gollum defender.
You especially love that he
favorite
smells
character.
like fish. What do you think about? I mean, because we're looking at this movie 20 years later.
Yeah,
it is impossible to talk about the Lord of the Rings without someone in the world doing a Gollum impression.
Yeah,
Diego, do you have a Gollum impression?
Yes, precious.
There it is. I knew. That's actually pretty good. Diego, would you like to give us some more of that?
Warm and wiggly.
Wow.
Good.
Really good. I am not good at Gollum, so that's great.
Thank you, Jason.
But Ashley, you big fan of the books.
Yeah.
I have a lot of the behind the scenes of like how they created Gollum and the differences between Gollum and the first movie. But like, I want to ask as a book fan,
Yes.
how do you think this? Did they pull off Gollum well? Is this a good Gollum?
Andy Serkis should have an Academy Award for this performance and for what this did for film. Andy Serkis is a genius. He's an underrated genius. And his work in this movie, I think, is easily dismissed because we don't see his face. Although I do think if you know what Andy Serkis looks like, Gollum kind of resembles him.
So, okay, here's a funny, I have a quote from Andy Serkis. He said, so Gollum is briefly glimpsed in The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes, and on the new Blu-rays, they edit him to look like the Post.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Oh,
okay,
wow.
so you do the quote, and then I'll tell you more about that.
So in the first movie, Gollum looks completely different.
Yeah.
And that's because they had already started building the character. And it was during the filming of The Two Towers that Peter Jackson realized that Andy Serkis's physical performance would be employed to create the digital creation they would actually do motion control. So Weta Digital had to alter the design of Gollum, and they scanned Serkis's face so they were able to incorporate his facial characteristics. Now, this is pretty, Gollum was originally set to be a CGI character fully, but then Andy Serkis gave such an amazing audition tape that they decided to put him on set and basically film every Gollum scene twice. Yep. So they would film it with Andy Serkis and without Andy Serkis. And then basically the VFX artists would animate Gollum on top of Andy Serkis's performance. So when they decided to do that, they had to remake Weta Digital. They scanned Andy Serkis's face and all that stuff like that. Andy Serkis later said that he thought Gollum looks like a split between a newborn baby and his father.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty accurate. So the point that I was making, so in Fellowship, if you remember from either having the VHS tapes or the original DVDs, you can definitely see the OG design, which is it's not the Bakshi animated design, but it's closer to that than it is to what we think of as Gollum being. And post the original DVD release, so on any of the Blu-rays, any of the up-res ones that we have now, they went back and redid that shot so he resembles Gollum from the following
Probably
two
for
movies.
The 4K ones, because I don't think I noticed it on the Blu-rays.
Well, it is now.
Right.
And all like digital versions going forward are now the sort of...
They George Lucas did.
I actually think for this, because it's a single shot, it's a non-speaking shot, I think it's a completely appropriate choice. I have no issue with it.
I would have left it, though. I would have left the original. I didn't really matter. It's like when you if you ever go back and watch the original Empire Strikes Back and you see the gentleman that played the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back that's not Ian McDermott.
Yeah.
I never cared. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't need that stuff. Diego, where do you come down that as a film fan? Like, do you think that once a movie is released, let it be? Or like, what do you think about Peter Jackson going back and changing the hallowed Fellowship of the Ring?
So it's interesting that you brought up both Star Wars and, thinking back to this one, because both of them have a similar kind of atmosphere. Because I remember seeing both scenes without the context of like, the actual actor that's going to be playing them in the later movies. And I remember both scenes felt very ominous. Like when you see Gollum, like it's very like, you just see his hands and then his eyes and he's just kind of skulking around. And there's just this, and when Gandalf is talking about him offhandedly, it's very ominous of what kind of, of the precedent this character is going to set for the future movies. Right. And so I like it that, I kind of wish they kept it just for that reasoning, because it just kind of weirdly sets that tone for him. And like what that character is going to represent just by that scene of just not exactly being what he's going to look like, but more of just the impression you get from him. Right. And it's the same thing with the Emperor scene where like he looks off and you're like, it's weird because he looks ambiguous, weirdly enough. You know what I mean? Because they don't really have the design down just right. But it's just there. But it gets away with it because he's a hologram, So it's just like you could get away with that. And again, it's just there's an ominous tone with Vader talking to him. And it just like, we got to get young Skywalker and da-da-da-da-da. And I don't know. I like it just particularly in these cases for villains to do that,
Nice.
Can we do Linguistics corner? Can we do Ashley was an English major corner since we're talking about Gollum?
Hold on a second. I have a sound effect for
Thank
that,
you.
I think. Hold on a second.
Thank you.
Hold on. I was unprepared for this. I did not have a sound effect ready.
Warning. Self-destruct sequence has been initiated.
Wrong franchise.
Warp core
Wrong
overload
genre.
in 4 minutes and 55 seconds. There will be no further audio warnings.
All right, there's your sound effect.
Okay, so Gollum's birth name when he was a river folk, Smeagol.
Spoilers.
If you look at the original Tolkien text, there's a funny little accent over the A.
Okay.
Same with his cousin Deagle, who we will see in Return of the King. Funny little accent over the A. What that accent indicates, per the types of languages that Tolkien pulls from, is that vowel is actually supposed to get its own syllable, its own pronunciation. So it's not Smeagol and Deagle. Per book canon, it's Smeagol and Deagle is the actual correct pronunciation of those.
Say it one more time, please.
Smeagol.
Okay. Sounds like something you'd put on bread.
I have to say, I think the Smeagol is the better choice.
I agree.
But Peter Jacks, I really respect you for that choice. But I will drag you forever for Smaug.
Say it one more time.
Smeagol. Because that's why he did Smaug, because Smaug has the same. So you pull out that vowel sound. So if you listen to like the Mythgard Tolkien Professor podcast, when they talk about this character, it's all Smeagol.
It's my favorite podcast.
All Smeagol all the time. And it's really wild. But that is actually how that character's name is supposed to be pronounced per Tolkien's written canon.
What was the name of this segment again?
Ashley was an English major.
Loved it.
Even though it has nothing to do with the English language, it's more like linguistic roots.
Love it. Pulling all the sound effects for you.
There you go.
All right, everybody. I think it's time. It's enough talking about, what was that again?
Smeagol.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about the coolest horse land in all of Lord of the Rings. But before we get to talking about the horse land, we have to take a break. And we're back. All right, everybody. We're talking about Two Towers. We're talking about horses. We're talking about Rohan.
Ponies.
A lot of ponies. Diego.
Yes, sir.
New land. That's the advantage of sequels, is that we get to go to places that we did not get to see, like Cloud City. And so I keep pulling back to Star Wars, but it's so hard.
It's an easy comparison, and Star Wars derives a lot from Lord of the Rings.
Epic trilogies around, we go to Cloud City. Now we get to meet Rohan, and we get to meet King Theoden and Eomer, played by a very young Carl Urban. Diego, what are your thoughts on Rohan and its introduction in this film?
I have to say, first and foremost, that the Rohan theme is my favorite throughout the whole entire trilogy. I love that theme so much. I think it's really beautiful and elegant.
Diego, it's mine as well.
You're both wrong.
You probably like Schmeigel's theme.
It's I do love Gollum's song, which is the song that plays over the title cards of this. I love that song. No, I mean it's second best, but like I Will Die on the Hill of Concerning Hobbits is the best.
Concerning Hobbits, but I'm with you, Diego. I love the theme to like the sort of
the violin theme is actually specifically, because I have the sheet music. It is specifically Eowyn's theme. It's not even Rohan's theme. That violin piece was written for Eowyn.
Mm-hmm. But continue about the horses. I know they're your favorite.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. So yeah, I think it's cool. I like the simplicity of it, of just how it's a little village. And I also want to note on somebody really quick, because, we also get Brad Dourif as Wormtongue. And
Deadwood's Brad Dourif.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Brad Dourif.
Chucky
himself.
Brad Dourif. Chucky
Billy Boyd
himself.
also went on to be in the Chucky franchise.
Yeah, which is fantastic. He's great, by the way. I love Billy Boyd in that. I'm a big Chucky fan, by the way, you guys, in case you didn't know.
Chucky talk.
But Brad Dourif's just one of those character actors that I love and adore, and it's just because he's like that, like Tim Curry. He's just always himself, whenever he plays a role. But like when I was watching it this time, I didn't realize like how reserved he really plays that role as Wormtongue, especially when there's so much room to be like slimy and despicable, and you could really play that very campy and over the top. And it's just, but he really does play that very straight. And I like how, again, it adds to the overall theme that we're talking about with this movie of just kind of like this somber, very depressing note of it, right? Because it's just the way he manipulates King Theoden and all that kind of like just being so with King Theoden being so decrepit and But yeah, I really love it with Rohan, of just, again, coming back to the simplicity of how it looks and simple people and just kind of like a small kingdom, and like, and it caters to it again with the theme of the movie of just like kind of overcoming triumphantly, right? Because it's a small village and they're getting picked on, with everything that's going on with Sauron and Saruman and all that stuff. And sorry, I'm kind of going on a weird little side.
No, it's very
do it.
You're dead on, and it's very Arthurian as well. So it has a very similar.
I would actually compare it more to Beowulf.
Oh, that's fair.
From a Tolkien perspective, he did a huge translation of Beowulf,
and they did take a very Viking inspiration by it. So, oh, what is that?
Oh, I think the phone's ringing.
Wait. Oh, we have a phone call. I'm sorry. We have to take this. It's the rule here. So, Ashley, will you pick this up, please?
Yeah. Hello?
Hello! Geek History Lesson. Tex Willerman, Texas magnate old man, and the owner of Texas Piggly Wiggly here.
Literally, why are you calling?
I heard it through the vine.
Oh, no, you heard horses, didn't you?
You were talking about horses. I owned a horse range.
Uh-huh.
Look. I've been enjoying this conversation because, as you know, I get to listen to podcasts before you release them. It's just when you become an oil magnate, it's what happens. Big fan. There's a new person here. I can see them in the call here. Who is this? Who am I talking to?
Hi, Tex. This is Diego, research assistant of GHL.
Oh, hello. How you doing? Diego is a good name. Have you ever worked with horses before?
I have not.
Would you
I'm
like
a little
to?
Intimidated. No, I'm a little intimidated.
All right. Well, I can build you like a baby saddle. If you can, you're watching movies when you're a baby, you can ride a horse when you're a baby too. That's what I do with all my kids.
Yeah, Diego is an adult baby. I think we've established.
Well, anyways, you all
looks kind of like Gollum, who might be called Smeagol.
You all have been talking about horses.
Uh-huh.
And how dare you not invite Tex Willerman, owner of a horse ranch, because you need to talk about the most important thing about Rohan, and that is the horses. Did you know there was a rod? That was one of the horses. That was Legolas's horse in Two Towers. And then there's Hasselfell. Hasselfell? Is that how you say it? How do you say it?
Haffalas.
Haffalas?
Yes.
Yeah, and then there was Snowmane. Snowmane was the horse that played King Theoden's horse.
Tex, if I can interrupt.
Please.
Do you know that the most important horse in all of Lord of the Rings lore debuts in this movie and is only name-checked in the extended version?
You talking about Brego?
I sure am.
Yeah. I thought that was a cat.
It's also a cat.
Is that a cat? Well, I'm confused. Is it a horse or is it a cat?
It's a cat named after a horse.
Okay, so who's the cat?
He is the intern of this podcast. So in the hierarchy, Diego is above the cat.
Oh, Diego outranks the cat?
Diego's above the cat.
Where do I rank in this hierarchy?
Below the cat.
Below the cat?
You are an unwanted guest.
Oh, that's unfair.
In an unexpected party.
Here I come with good horse information and and come on now.
Okay, Tex, I have horse trivia for you. Who does the horse Brego belong to before he becomes King Aragorn's horse?
No one, because horses belong to no one.
It's not true.
That is the truth of raising horses. I've done it for years.
Ethically, it's the truth.
Yes.
But
see, I'm right.
But he's actually
he's
Prince Theodred's horse, and Theodred dies, son of Theoden. Thus making Éomer the eventual heir.
I just want to point out this podcast. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
How dare you?
A little messy. But, I'm good friends with Viggo Mortensen. Have I told you this?
No.
He's purchased a couple horses for me.
That makes sense.
It's weird because, I'll invite him over to the ranch and Judy loves having him because, when he wakes up every morning, he recreates that scene from Captain Fantastic where he's just butt naked.
Wouldn't we all love that? Do you know he bought one of the Brego horses?
I know.
There were a couple.
He needed some friends for Brego. That's why he bought horses from him.
Oh, I see.
So there you go.
The Brego horse, by the way, passed away a couple years ago, and it was truly devastating.
I was at the funeral.
I cried.
It was very cried. I just also want to point out that the horse that carries Éowyn and Merry to the Pelennor fields was called Windfulla.
Yep.
And it was played by, I met this horse, by the way.
Uh-huh.
This horse was actually played by a horse called Dublin.
I love that.
This is all true information. I'm not making this up.
Pelennor Fields, by the way, does not happen in this movie.
Yeah, but I'm just wanted to jump in because I wanted to make Dublin was a good boy.
Okay.
Or girl, I don't know.
Was definitely a girl because they don't let boy horses on camera.
Hey, don't you disrespect Dublin.
I'm not disrespecting. I'm just stating that as a fact.
I just want to point out
biological fact.
all of this horse information is very real. This was not a bit.
I mean, it's not a bit. Well, it's not a lie.
Anyways, you'll hear the real bit when I might be returning in a couple of weeks. I'm just throwing it out there.
Oh boy.
We'll see. Anyways, nice to meet you, Diego. Again, if you'd like to oil up some saddles someday, just give me a call.
Absolute pleasure to meet you, Tex. Absolutely.
Well, you're welcome. I don't know if I can say the same, but
okay.
Rude.
Okay.
Well, apparently you're a baby. I don't know.
I think Tex is about to be feuding with two members of the GHL family.
Who's below the cat here? Like,
well, technically I learned you're my boss, even though I'm a millionaire. So I don't know about this. Anyways, pleasure to meet you. It was a pleasure to meet you. Call me when you want to oil some saddles, and Ashley, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Anyways, all right. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Click. Oh, there you go. Tex Willerman, oil magnate, talking about horses.
Did not expect a Tex cameo in the Lord of the Rings episode.
I didn't either, but
here we find ourselves.
2020. Ashley.
2020.
Yep.
Is that what year it is?
It feels like 2020. So I want to talk about Theoden here, and especially like the great scene of Gandalf walking up with Brad Dourif and casting off, the big full reveal of Gandalf the White. I love Bernard Hill as Theoden, and
Bernard Hill is an underrated talent.
Yes, and he's a BBC actor.
Yes, he is.
But he carries, I feel, so much of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And from reading the books, even Theoden is my favorite Lord of the Rings character.
Theoden King. And it kills me in this movie every time. He comes back to life. I think that's an amazing scene. But the scene great bit of visual effects.
Yep, the scene that really gets me is him standing outside of Rohan at the grave of his son.
Yeah.
Now, I actually think this, in the extended edition, you see the funeral of, what's his son's name?
Theodred. You should have seen it. When Eowyn sings the weird burial song, I really think we should have seen this.
I don't know. See, this is one of the few times that I think the theatrical version was correct, because I love the hard cut from triumphant to the lowest ever of he found out that his son is dead.
Interesting.
I think it just really works. And I think showing the funeral cuts all of it.
It's interesting. I like it because I think it gives us a sense of what the Rohirrim culture is that we don't really get. Mm-hmm. Otherwise.
Fun fact, there's a very specific line in this movie that was inspired by Bernard Hill. When they were filming, it's the line that
these flowers grew over the graves of my father?
No, it's parents shouldn't have to bury their children.
Oh, yes.
Bernard Hill told a story that when he was in Glasgow, Scotland, a woman came up to him and told him about one of her children that had died shortly before then, and that she said that parents shouldn't have to bury their children. And so when he was doing the scene, he asked Peter if he could add it to the scene. And they did. So that line is an improv.
Great actors.
Yep. Really, really, really good. Let's talk about Diego's favorite character, Arwen.
Arwen is not really in this movie.
That's what I was going to say. Diego, we get this. We get like a very brief scene where like Arwen is told by her father, Elrond, that Aragorn will not return. Arwen basically has nothing to do in this movie besides some like fancy montages.
They have that dream kiss.
That's true.
When Aragorn like dies, dies.
Or is it a flashback?
I mean, it's both, right? It's like a hallucination that he has, and you see her, and it looks like he brings her back to life, and actually Brago's like chewing on his face.
Yeah. But yeah, Diego, as a writer yourself, what do you feel about this? Arwen, Liv Tyler, big cast member, big star. But we got to feature her in this movie. Like, we can't not have her in here. But in the books, Arwen is not here. Do you think we should have put more of her in this movie? Because I don't know if you know this, but in the original draft of the script for the Two Towers, Arwen shows up at Helm's Deep and helps fight the battle.
She sure do.
That's a shame. They missed that opportunity for her. Because I remember thinking back when I saw Fellowship, like, she's so cool, right? She comes in, saves Frodo, and, facing off against the, oh my God, I just went brain dead.
The Ring Wraiths?
The Nazgul.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And so, and she has just this great big introduction scene, right? It's great. It's cool. And then here it's just she's kind of laying around being sad while Enya's playing. And it's kind of a bummer that, because like just having such a great introduction scene and then they don't really know what to do with her in this. And then they just kind of find out that, they were going to give her more action oriented stuff. It's just it's a shame. That kind of bums me out.
As a woman, lying around being sad while Enya is playing is a cornerstone of our existence. I've done that many times.
I was gonna say that there are actually many times I'll walk into a room and I hear, and Ashley's just reading a book.
I will say, do not disparage Enya because she is an icon who lives in a castle with 9 cats.
No, she's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely no. I mean, that was a poor impression of Enya, and I want to send the letter right now, the Raven, straight to her island, her cat island, and say, Goddess Enya, I apologize.
Irish goddess Enya.
Enya and Bjork, like witch house unto themselves.
I mean, well, they're kind of like evil sisters, right? Enya's the good one and Bjork's the evil one.
Dark mirrors of each other. Not unlike Arwen and Eowyn in a lot of ways, at least narratively.
Well, that's a great segue here. Let's talk about Eowyn in Miranda Tate, I believe.
Nope, Miranda Otto.
Miranda Otto, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was like, you like her, so you better get her name right.
I actually do like her. And she is introduced into this movie as the antithesis to Arwen, as like sort of the mortal princess that Aragorn could get, that is actually maybe
Aragorn old enough to be her grandfather.
Well, and that's the thing about this movie is that Eowyn very much, this entire movie, like, dotes on Aragorn.
Yeah.
Like, she's got mad crushes on him.
Okay, I want to say one thing in defense of Eowyn, because I am going to be the person who comes down hard on Eowyn.
I like Eowyn.
Aragorn she goes, yo, you got a girlfriend? Aragorn's like, nah, she moving to Valinor. So, like, she is getting nothing but signals that her behavior is not inappropriate throughout this. Now, I'm going to let you guys say something nice about her because I have nasty things to say about Eowyn.
Well, Diego, I really like her, and I actually really like her scene with Aragorn in the extended edition where she like asks his age. I think that's a really good
scene.
Yes, I think it's a really good scene. That's one of the scenes where I'm like, oh, they should have put that in the theatrical version.
They didn't want to explain the Dunedain.
I know. But Diego, what do you think about Eowyn in this movie? Because after this movie, I mean, she has one really great moment in Return of the King, but like this is about all she gets.
So, okay, just to preface this, initially when we were just talking about Liv Tyler's character, I thought you were asking me about this character, and I was like, oh crap. And that's always been a fundamental problem for me because the names are too similar. So I'd always get them confused, And so that's one thing that kind of knocks it off. And then plus, like, not to be mean about it, but she kind of feels like a nothing character for me. Like, it's just, she's just kind of there. She crushes on Aragorn and then like, but nothing really comes into fruition. Like, I don't even feel the stakes of it. You know what I mean? Of like, it just like, that, maybe this is a possibility for him. It's like for him, it's just kind of like his head's always with Liv Tyler and she has that crush and there's that dynamic is non-existent. You know what I mean? And so like that could have been something for her to do, but it's just, she's just kind of there with a crush and it's unfortunate, and
this might be in the Tolkien-esque writing of the original novel, but it does kind of suck because Eowyn's, her being the mortal is sort of set up as both of these women are set up as the choice of Aragorn's life. Is he going to like accept this magical destiny or is he just going to be a man? And, and it's funny, like, because Arwen is very much the representation of like, he's going to ascend.
Well, she represents Numenor, which is descendant of elves. Yep. She's an elf.
And Eowyn is very much you're just going to settle down and you might be like a guy that helps the king with his horses. Like you're going to be sort of a mercenary. You're just going to go around and help people. And that's kind of cool. And I'm down with that. And because of that,
that's why she marries the ranger. That's why she marries Faramir.
Yes. And that's kind of like why Eowyn kind of gets, I'd say short shifted in this movie quite a bit. Let's talk about our favorite characters, Merry and Pippin.
Wait, no, can I say something about Eowyn really quick?
Please.
Eowyn is a great character in the books. Eowyn is barely adequate character as portrayed by Miranda Otto. Miranda Otto is not the person to play Eowyn. I like Miranda Otto in everything except in the role of Eowyn. She is so amazing in Sabrina.
She's great in 24.
She is not Eowyn. She cannot wield a sword, and it's embarrassing in the scenes where everyone's like, "You're good with a sword," and I'm like, "You're not. Stop it."
Do you have a 2001 recasting?
I don't.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not a casting director. I know Uma Thurman was up for the role. That does not appeal to me in any way, shape, or form.
No, that seems off too.
I don't. I'm really sorry.
That's
but
fine.
like for me, I love Eowyn in the books, and Miranda Otto is just like not giving what I want for this character. But what I want to say about Eowyn is an exercise in oppositions. She is the opposite of Arwen, and she is the opposite of her brother, Éomer, because she's the one who stays and remains loyal and looks after her uncle, cum adopted father, and Éomer is the one who leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's her purpose as a literary foil, and then she becomes the stewardess of Gondor in the end. She is nothing but a device to show what everybody else's other path could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of devastating in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I just think of all the casting and all the characters. I think she is one of the worst in these movies.
Interesting.
For me, like every time she shows up, because she's so beautiful and she looks so good in that shot from Return of the King, where it's the helicopter, the crane shot that goes around Edoras and she's standing there and the banner gets ripped off, which was a complete accident and just
That's in this movie.
Nope, that is at the beginning of the Return of the King, and it was in the trailer for this movie.
It's actually the in the theatrical version of The Two Towers, Aragorn picks up that flag.
Maybe it's in the theatrical version, but it's the opening. It's
Yep.
the first time we return there in Return of the King. But I think to me the biggest crime of this movie is the way Éowyn is executed, portrayed, and played.
Let's talk about Merry and Pippin.
Yes, let's.
Please talk about them in the trees, Ashley.
Okay.
And Mr. Treebeard. John Rhys Davies playing his second part in this movie trilogy.
Yes, and he talks a lot about how he found the voice was by he's breathing in at the same time that he's speaking and delivering the lines. I love this storyline. I think some of the places that it's inserted, particularly in the extended edition, slows down the narrative of the rest of the movie.
An end slowing down a movie? How? What?
I know,
Impossible.
shocking. How
Impossible.
appropriate. My good friend Tiana Quant recently read The Silmarillion, and she texted me and was like, "The Ents just lost their wives? Like, what does that even mean?" This storyline to me is Tolkien in a nutshell. It is these two simple creatures who know what they want out of life, who have been swept up in something bigger than themselves. And this is their moment where they have to decide if they are going to seize their destiny, or if they're going to become victims of it and they're going to become overwhelmed by it. I think the hobbits at every turn illustrate J.R.R. Tolkien working through what happened to him when he was away at the First World War. And the Merry and Pippin story here in particular, leading to their eventual hero turns, is just that on the screen. And I think Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd do a lot with very little in this movie.
All right, so let's get to, I think, the thing that everybody wants to talk about in this movie, the Helm's Deep, because we've had enough about trees. So we are going to talk about Helm's Deep right after this, everybody. And we're back talking about Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. And we're definitely talking about what was a rock quarry or a hole in the ground that they turned into a legendary castle called Helm's Deep.
I drove past it and cried when I was in New Zealand.
Welcome to Ashley Drove Past It and Cried.
It's an active rock core. You can't get out. You just drive by it on the freeway and then loop back the other way.
They're not going to let you walk into it. They're quarrying rocks.
I would have if I could have, because this is also the set where they tore this down and then they rebuilt Minas Tirith there.
Can you imagine all these Kiwis be like, get these nerds out of here. We're trying to get quotes.
Get in the car.
Where's your hard helmet? Diego, the Battle of Helm's Deep was edited down from 20 hours of footage.
All night shoots.
All night shoots over 4 months.
Incredible.
I think this battle is really successful. And I think it's really successful because this is something that I think a lot of action movies don't do well. And it's called, some people call it blocking. I call it geography. When you're watching a movie, if you're ever confused about where the characters are, especially, and this is all a result of the editing, it becomes hard to follow the scene or to follow the story. And I think Helm's Deep is one of the most successful, just in terms of selling the geography of like, okay, now we're on the wall. Now we're on the bridge. Now we're in the door. Now we're in the inner tower. It is very simple to follow. And it also acts with the idea of the design of it, because with each part of Helm's Deep falling, the drama rises because you're just like, oh man, they are really screwed. Diego, what are your thoughts on Helm's Deep? Successful? What really works in this? What doesn't work in this?
I think you're exactly right. It's a very intelligent, well-constructed battle scene. Just even from the opening, like from the opening of it, where you get young boys putting on oversized armor and helmets and their mothers are crying, and it, you get the sweeping music of it all. And then like, I love how the battle opens, right? And it's just quiet. And it's
so
just
it
dark
begins.
sounds. Yeah. And like, and then the rain kind of trickles in, you hear the hordes marching in, and it's unsettling, right? And then like even, and I'm probably going to be jumping around all over the place, but even before that battle starts and the elves come in to help, like there's just something like you get very easily caught up in the emotion of everything that's like everything that hits you, right? And I agree with what you're saying with the geography, because like, you spend the first, I'm going to just be guessing on time-wise all over it, but let's say 10 minutes on the wall, right? And you're seeing everything that's playing out. Then the wall blows up. So then they're fighting downstairs. I even love how they interject like a nice quiet moment in, let's say, a 45-minute battle sequence, right? With the door being broken in and Aragorn and Gimli have to buy time. And they sneak around to the side, and it's great because it's levity. There's levity to it, but it's not goofy or silly. It's just kind of a genuine character moment where it's like, you have to toss me because I literally can't make this jump. But it's a clever way to interject like with so much intensity and so much fight going on that it's just like there's nice little levity to it, and doing it very cleverly without actually like being distracting. You know what I mean? It's very organic. And I think a lot of that plays into it,
It's funny. I was going to say that probably my least favorite moment in this movie is in the Helm's Deep battle.
My least favorite part of this movie is in the Helm's Deep battle.
Well, it's funny because something that has always bumped me every time I've watched this movie is the football celebratory kind of dance that the Uruk-hai does when he's carrying the bomb into the tunnel. Like he's sort of like, he's like, and like all the other Uruk-hais
look, those are dudes
like,
in giant rubber suits. Okay, they are doing the best they can.
I know, but like I just would have done another take if I was Mr. Peter Jackson. But like, it's just like the takes in the movie, like he's like sort of like dancing with the bomb, and then he jumps in.
He's probably a rugby player who's there on the weekend.
Ashley, what's your least favorite part in this movie that happens in Helm's Deep?
Hands down, when Craig Parker as Haldir and the elves show up.
Because that's not in the books.
It is not. And I like Haldir. I like Craig Parker as Haldir. I like when he later goes on to play like a real piece of work in CW's Reign, which is one of my favorite historically inaccurate television shows.
Is he also into the Badlands? Or no?
That's Martin Sokus, who played Celeborn from the first movie, Galadriel's husband.
They look similar.
Haldir is the elf who's like, who brings them to Galadriel and Celeborn.
I watched Amazon's Power of the Rings. I'm pretty certain that character's dead.
We're not talking about it. It's also called the Rings of Power.
Whatever.
But
House of the Rings of Power Dragons.
What upsets me about it is, to me, a big part of Helm's Deep, aside from being obviously a great action piece to the film, but like narratively, is the thesis and the difference between the two kings. So it is Theoden who is leading from the back, and it is Aragorn who is leading from the front. It is the new generation of leaders, Éomer eventually coming in and echoing that, who will become the king of Rohan, versus sort of the old school dying ways of thought and leadership, again, echoed by Denethor in Return of the King as well, that got the world into this position in the first place. And it is also about the rise of human beings in Middle-earth taking over this great land in the Third Age. And by having the elves ultimately come in to kind of save the day, I think it takes the knees out of that a little bit. And in the book, they are very adamant about like the numbers and the statistics and how much harder the human beings have to work to win the day. I understand we wanted to get more, like the elves are one of the coolest things in Lord of the Rings, and they are like objectively some of the most beautiful cast members. Like I understand why we wanted to have them here. Craig Parker is super dope. Let's have him. Let's kill him. Why not? That feels meaningful. No, it doesn't. We barely know who Haldir is. I just don't like it, and it frustrates me every single time they show up. And then like the idea that it would have been Arwen, who I love, would have been so much worse. It would have been so bad if Arwen was like, I am here, Daddy Aragorn, and now we are going to kill the Uruk-hai. Like, can you imagine?
Let's kiss him.
Liv Tyler? No, girl. And I love her in this part, but like, no.
Well, let's talk about something that you do like in this movie. The Faramir of it all.
I love Faramir.
David Wenham, because Boromir's brother comes across old Sam and Gollum and Frodo, and he decides, once he figures out that they have the Ring of Power, that they're going to go to Gondor, and he's going to prove his worth to his dad. Now, in the book, of course, this does not happen. They do not go to Osgiliath. They do not go anywhere near Gondor. And actually, they intentionally wrote a line into the script where Sam says, by all rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are, which is supposed to be like winking at the readers of the book that they didn't do that. But I actually think this whole Faramir in Osgiliath, the kind of the whole Faramir stuff, I think it's really good. Also, this is one of the biggest travesties that the theatrical version cut out the flashback scene
with Sean Bean.
Bean.
Good. And John Noble.
Sean Bean, John Noble. And so it's Denethor, Boromir, and Faramir. And it's them getting the message that Boromir has to go to Rivendell. Fun fact about that scene, Sean Bean apparently had just returned to London, finishing all his scenes for Fellowship of the Ring, when they called him up on the phone and said, we're going to do this scene with you, Faramir Denethor. Can you get on a plane and come right back?
Also, Sean Bean, very famously afraid of flying.
Yeah. But that was the story where he was like, I was in London for one day. I got on the plane back to New Zealand the very next day.
It's amongst some of my favorite work that he does in the movie, too.
And it's a travesty that it was cut. But I really like the Osgiliath sequence I think it looks beautiful. I think the cinematography is amazing. The Nazgul on their little dragons, I don't know what they're called.
They're called fell beasts.
The fell beasts and stuff like that are actually, I know the sound effect is mules. I actually think this is some of the strongest Sam and Frodo stuff in the entire trilogy, is the stuff that happens in Osgiliath. Because, I don't know. I think before then, this is the problem, and it's the problem with any characters that are walking. Sam and Frodo spend a lot of this movie just kind of wandering in circles. And it's interesting at the same time that it's not interesting, if you know what I mean.
It's interesting because they're good enough actors to pull it off.
Yeah. But Ashley, I know you're a big fan of Faramir.
I love all things Gondor.
What do you think about Faramir in this movie, the Osgiliath stuff? I would love to hear your thoughts.
Faramir's very different here than he is in the book. He's much more scholarly and considered in the book, which is one of the reasons why they don't really go anywhere. They're in Ithilien, which is this forest region in between Mordor and Gondor that Faramir sort of leads this troop in protecting. And they never really leave there. And then eventually they kind of sit around and talk about their feelings, and then he lets them go. Daisy Wenham, which is his nickname.
Daisy?
Yeah. Oh. So I think it's Miranda Otto. Somebody in the extended version tells the story about how David Wenham and Miranda Otto had worked together on a bunch of stuff in the past. And when she showed up on set, she kept calling him Daisy. So they all called him Daisy Wenham. He is a little more serious, a little more dramatic, a little more of a modern portrayal than what we got in the book crafted in the 40s and 50s. I think he does tremendous work in this part. Faramir's kind of a thankless part until Return of the King. I like him because I like sad boys who like to read. And I think he's one of the more tragic characters. I think he's a great foil for Boromir here. And David Wenham, if he was not as good as he was in these scenes, they would be, because they're also quite stagnant. They could be very dull. I do like the scene in Osgiliath. In every trailer, there was the shot where the Fell Beast popped up right in front of Frodo.
Mhm.
That's super dramatic.
One of the best shots in this entire movie
And
trilogy.
epic, and it's so, even by contemporary standards, it's so well rendered. Like, shout out to all the team at Weta. Like, so much of these shots still hold up.
The cinematography of this entire movie trilogy is astounding, and I think the only thing that ever brings it down is like the aging of the VFX here and there.
Yeah. But I love all the Faramir stuff. For me, it's a big bonus.
Diego, what do you think about Faramir?
I agree. He's possibly top 3 favorite characters for me.
Whoa. Okay, you can't just introduce that. We got to hear your top 3 right now.
Oh, wow.
It can be in no particular order, of course.
Yeah, because this is really off the cuff for me. I'm going
to need you to rank all the Star Wars movies in order, including the holiday specials and the cartoons and the books.
Okay, so Star Wars Holiday Special #1, obviously.
Finally, somebody agrees with me. Okay, let's hear your top 3 LOTR characters.
I would probably have to say Faramir, Gimli, and Sam, to be honest.
Gimli?
Yeah.
That's a character you don't often hear. What do you love about Gimli?
So, low-key, my favorite sequence in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy is in Fellowship when they go to the Mines of Moria. Me and one of my best friends, we always geek out about the one scene where he's like, right before they fight, and he says that epic line that there's still one dwarf breathing in the mines.
Yeah.
And it is so cool. And and I know they kind of ham him up a little bit more as the movies progressively go. But there's just, I don't know. I think he's charming. I think he's really cool. I don't know. There's a vibe with him that I really dig with him.
If you haven't watched Rings of Power, there's high quality dwarf stuff in Rings of Power.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely dive into that.
But so Faramir, what do you feel about Faramir in this ending? And do they pull off the idea that Faramir is sort of the better man than Boromir?
Yes. It's funny because as we get into it later, when we start wrapping up, I honestly think not necessarily with Faramir, but he is featured in one I think is one of the best scenes in the movie. And I'll go into that more down the line. But yeah, I like, there's a lot of strong sequences every time he's featured. Like there's a really great scene with Sam that I love where he drops truth bombs on him about his brother. I love that scene. And it's like one of those things where it's like when you start to you see him and he's kind of a jerk or more or less a jerk. And then when you kind of get more of his backstory with Return of the King, it's devastating. There's something very devastating about him. And it just adds fuel to it whenever I watch Two Towers now, just seeing where his character ends up and what his motivations are. You know what I mean? It adds to it. And that's what I really love about him.
All right, so now I want to kind of wrap up our talk about the movie before we get all the best stuff, because the ending of this movie is, and I do want to shout out, I forgot to pull up his name, so I'm going to slightly Google while we do it.
I might know who it is just off the top of my head.
Well, I want to give a shout out to the editor of this movie.
Oh, I don't know who that is. I'm so sorry.
Edited by Michael J. Horton. Now, each of these movies were edited by 3 different editors, which I think was a very smart choice by Peter Jackson because he wanted each movie to feel slightly different. And I think that was a brilliant choice on Mr. Jackson's part.
It's also smart considering they produced all these films at the same time.
Yes, they were basically editing all 3 of these movies at the exact same time.
Concurrently.
But I want to talk about the ending of this movie, because the ending of this movie, again, we get the wrap of Helm's Deep and, Gandalf showing up. We get the giant battle at Osgiliath and Faramir. And there's one more. Oh, the Treebeard. It's a tree. It's all the Ents attacking Orthanc.
Yes, in Isengard.
In Isengard, because the hobbits finally went to Isengard. And, a lot of other movies try to do these epic, all 3 of these endings are pretty epic. They're pretty epic battles. And with a lesser editor, it would have been mush.
Yes.
And I actually think the ending of this movie is pretty fantastic. And I want to bring something into fan knowledge. Right now in sort of film discourse, reshoots are a dirty word.
Yeah.
Every time you hear about a big budget movie doing reshoots, you just watch Twitter and Hive and whatever other post go crazy about oh my God, the movie must be terrible. The ending of this movie, extensive reshoots. And the biggest reshoot was in Osgiliath.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest reshoot that they filmed a year after they completed principal photography on this movie is actually what I think is in one of the top 3 scenes of this entire trilogy. And that is Sam's final speech.
Yes, I was hoping you would bring that up.
This was a complete rewrite and reshoot 1 year. They filmed this Sean Astin and Elijah Wood. This moment, the speech where they're like kind of hiding in Osgiliath before Faramir decides to let them go, where Sam is talking about the stories. This
is the speech that Diego was alluding to with all the truth bombs.
Oh, well, he has some truth bombs earlier. Yes. But this is like right around that moment. I even wanted to read some of this because I think this writing is so amazing. They reshot this because they decided that there was a hole. They didn't have the emotional catharsis. And so Sean Astin, Samwise Gamgee says, it's like the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered, the ones that stayed with you. Folks in those stories had lots of chances turning back when they didn't, but they were holding on to something, that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. And if that is not the thesis of the Lord of the Rings, I don't know what is. And I think Sean Astin does this brilliantly. And again, they filmed this like 8 months before the movie released.
I also want to say that I don't think Sean Astin and Elijah Wood get enough kudos for how
holding this movie
good they are in these parts, because we look at the hobbits and Frodo and Sam in particular as being a little silly and being a little over emotional. Mm-hmm. But you are right, like repeatedly, they are at the heart of what the story is.
So Diego, I would love to talk to you about this. Let's talk about this. The wrap up of Helm's Deep, the wrap up of Osgiliath, the Ents. What stands out to you in this giant climactic 3-way climax?
It's interesting, right? Because there's so many different cathartic beats that each sequence kind of ends on, right? Because like with Helm's Deep, you got Gandalf coming in with reinforcements and they're charging down the hill, and it's a triumphant, like good versus evil kind of moment.
A lot of
right?
CGI horses.
Yes.
Tex would be mad about
look at that angle. You got it. The horses would die.
Tex is rolling in his grave right now.
And then you're getting Sam's heartfelt speech. And then, and then you have trees running around, knocking over the tower. And then, and like the flood. And it's like, and it's funny again, because coming back to the thing I've been repeating over is how somber and sobering this movie is. And to kind of have your sequel, or, for lack of a better word, for the second part to be where it's usually kind of the downward turn, to have it more triumphant is very refreshing, but rewarding too,
Ashley, let's talk about the big climactic 3-way for you. What stands out? What works? What does, like just general thoughts here.
I think the most important part of it is the victory at Helm's Deep, because it shows you that human beings can pull it off. And that's a huge part of the thesis of this film and this story is, are human beings ready to step up and evolve in this way? So for me, I think of the shot a lot where Eowyn comes out and she hugs Aragorn because she's been down in the caves. I think about that moment a lot when I think about the end of this, but I also... It's sort of echoed again in Return of the King, but I love also the victory of the Ents, of the victory of the natural world over industry. Unfortunately, our world is not echoing that so much right now. I think that is very important. And this movie, ultimately, even though things are darkening, particularly in the Frodo Sam story, all of these movies end with hope. And that is, one, a marker of who Tolkien is as a creator, 2, a marker of the types of stories that were being told at the time when this was written. But 3, I think that's an important thing to take away from the Two Towers in particular, is even in great darkness, you can come away with great hope.
Oh, it's beautifully said.
Thank you.
All right. So I want to open it up to the floor of Diego and possibly Tex, and no more Tex. He's rolling in his grave, remember? And Ashley, any final thoughts before we move into our normal movie retrospective, rankings and stuff like that? Diego, any final thoughts on Two Towers?
Just a solid movie. I mean, I guess I'll elaborate more when we get into our ranking of things. But yeah,
it was more. I was throwing. I was mainly throwing it to be like, anything we didn't talk on that you want to you want to pick up. I mean, I'm gonna throw out one of my favorite lines that makes me chuckle in this movie is in the end where there's an Ent that there's two things in the end scenes. There's
the one who's on fire.
Actually, you spoiled it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You spoiled it. Diego, did you hear this?
I did. I knew what you were going to say too before.
Yeah, there's an Ent that's on fire and he dunks himself in the river. I think that makes me laugh every single time. But Diego, anything that we didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
I will. Well, yeah, I guess we could cut to it. Is a lot of work with Smeagol, right, and the Gollum.
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't really elaborate too much on the duality scenes. Probably his big
these have been memified to death.
Yeah, where he talks to himself. But like something I wanted to kind of note on is when I was rewatching this, I was really impressed how much little details goes into this movie, particularly with the visual effects. And something I wanted to note on with Smeagol particularly is I think it's very fascinating that, and not to explain this to you guys, but to the listeners, that when you're doing conversations, it's always the 1-2 shot, right? You got the one shot on the actor, and then the other one on the second shot is the other actor responding, right?
Over the shoulder shot, as they would say.
And with Smeagol, it was very fascinating because particularly even now that it was 20 years ago, most modern blockbusters wouldn't even bother because they would do it the cheapest way possible, is to have your CGI character and then have the other actor react to them, right? And, they could be anywhere and film it. With like Smeagol, they always tried to make sure he's in frame. And just for a few seconds of Sam or Frodo responding to him, and like anybody that knows anything about production, that's a lot of hours to put in just for just a few frames for Smeagol to be there, just those little details. And again, that like sells this idea of like how real this all feels, like it just the commitment that they brought into it. And I have to also shout this scene out. So when I was young and my sisters were really obsessed with these movies, one of my sisters was really obsessed with the sequence when they fight the wargs. And it's this little detail when Legolas gets on the horse. I don't know if you guys ever noticed
where
it.
He shakes.
It's when he pulls it, because the horse comes from his right side and he pulls at it with his left side and basically swings his entire body onto it, right?
Yeah, where CGI Legolas like flips up on there, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so funny to me because my sister was obsessed with that. And I had this distilled image in my head of it looking kind of dated or janky or whatever, right? And when rewatching it, I was like, it's pretty fluid. Like, obviously, he can't really do that. And obviously, it's fake. It's not really happening. But it's a choice, and it was a decision, and it was a commitment that they wanted to make for Legolas of like, oh, this character is so cool. But like, I don't know. It's just one of those little flavorings that they do. And it's a bunch of those throughout the movie of just these small details that actually really impact and build this foundation of imagination and like what they're committed to make you feel like you're really in this world, If
you remember from The Hobbit, Legolas can defy gravity.
Well, if you remember, Legolas to me is so funny. Is a cultural marker of this movie.
He is.
Legolas lets you know that this was filmed when the X Games was cool, because he does that. He skateboards down the shield in Helm's Deep, and then he climbs the Oliphant at Pelennor Field. And to me, it's so like, I have this of a piece of those, and then I hard cut to my younger brother playing Tony Hawk, and I'm like, yeah, that was a real moment, wasn't it? And like, I don't know if it's because Orlando Bloom was like really young, or because like Legolas does nothing but look evocative and beautiful into the middle distance. Like they didn't know what to do with him, but like Legolas to me so embodies that like this was made in the early aughts.
Fun fact, Orlando Bloom was originally up for Faramir.
Yeah, that was his first audition. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It would have been awful.
All right, everybody, we are going to get through our best actor, best scene, the rating of this movie. We're gonna finally reveal. I know you've been waiting this entire podcast for that answers. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get to those just in a second. Right after this. And we're back. We're at the end times of Two Towers here, and we are ready to determine all of our ratings. So we're going to start with our guest here, like we do in all of our movie retrospectives. Diego, who is, in your opinion, the best actor in this movie?
Now, if it wasn't for one other, I would have went with Sean Astin. For me, he has some really powerful moments, and as I've alluded to earlier with just the truth bombs, he has one of my favorite one-liners was like, "You're his bodyguard." his gardener. I just, just all that stuff cracks me up. And I would have went with him if it wasn't for the fact that Andy Serkis was in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's an incredible performance. And, I was talking about the duality scene earlier, but this is going to bleed into what I think is the best scene, if you guys don't mind. But it is with him. My favorite scene is kind of like the reprise of that duality scene where he gets betrayed by Frodo. Faramir captures him and throws him in the corner, and he just crawls into the corner and he starts crying. And the camera just sits on him, and all of the performance just rests on Andy Serkis's vocal performance of just switching between Gollum and Smeagol, and then Faramir just kind of responding to it. And it's just, the genuine emotion of him crying and feeling betrayal, and then just turning back into Gollum. And it's just, it's so emotionally impactful for me. And it's like, it really got to me this time because I've always loved the other scene previous, the duality. That one's really fun, but this one just, I don't know. It's just because, especially, I guess it adds to it when you know that Andy Serkis, who is doing a lot of these movements, and he's actually doing this and embodying it. It's powerful. It really gets to me, and I think and what you said earlier, Ashley, it's just he's severely underappreciated, and he doesn't get enough odds for this. Like.
Ashley.
Yes.
Who's the best actor in this movie?
I mean, I think it's hard to give it to anyone other than Andy Serkis for me personally, just for what he does and for how iconic this performance remains. Not going to be my favorite scene, does not have him in it, but this movie is an achievement and a host unto itself. And a huge part of it is what he does. And I just don't think any of it would have worked with anyone else. I think it's so singularly him. And I think because it's surprising here, like in Return of the King, we don't get a ton of new inventive stuff with Gollum, which is fine. And that's not the point of that movie. But yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Diego and give it to Andy Serkis. So Jason, you going a hat trick, or are we going to give it to someone else for
I'm going to be contrarian. I mean, I think automatically this is one of those situations where I think Andy Serkis is automatically number one, and there's no conversation. So I think the real conversation is who is number two. I think number two is Bernard Hill. I think it is King Theoden, because I think King Theoden is a thankless part.
Absolutely.
And I think with a lesser actor, we would hate that character. But because of Bernard Hill, yeah, Theoden does stuff wrong. And yeah, he doesn't quite listen to Aragorn, but you understand him. And I think, again, with a lesser actor, we would not like that character. And his death in the next movie would be meaningless. But with Bernard Hill, it means so much. So correct me if I'm wrong. Did both of you already give your best scenes?
No.
Diego, you gave your best scene already?
Yeah, I was talking about the scene with him crawling into the corner and crying, and then Smeagol becomes Gollum, like officially.
Yes.
When they're in Ithilien, that's behind the waterfall.
I mean, I will follow this up. I do agree with Ashley that Andy Serkis was robbed an Oscar for this role.
I mean, even if they had to invent a category for him, because I don't know. I don't know if I mean, maybe just give him best actor, but like Andy Serkis, I mean, deserves 1 million awards for what he's done for this industry, but particularly for this part.
And it was funny when the Planet of the Apes prequels movies came around too.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing with War of the Planet of the Apes. I was like, man, he was robbed an Oscar of this, or even being nominated for this movie. And
to be able to do that with like non-humanoid characters is quite something.
I think
as
there should be. I actually do think they should create a role that is best motion capture acting.
I agree.
So, okay, Ashley, what is your favorite scene in this movie? Then?
Okay, so
what do you think is the best scene in this movie?
The best shot in this movie, which was a sexual awakening for generations of people.
Okay.
Is Viggo Mortensen throwing open the doors.
In all the trailers as well.
It's so iconic.
Please elaborate to all the men.
People not attracted to men?
Yes. What about this throwing open the doors is like a sexual awakening?
He's just really hot.
I mean, I do not. Diego, is he hot?
Oh yeah.
See, there you go. I agree. There's no argument here. Yeah.
I think it's he's hot and wet and dirty, which is appealing.
Wet and dirty.
Hot, wet, and dirty.
Is that the tagline of this movie?
Hot, wet, and dirty.
Wet and dirty. Preach, Ashley. Preach.
Geek history lesson. Hot, wet, and dirty. It is just such a if you want. Okay. The idea of masculinity is a really deep concept that I cannot explain to you.
We don't have enough time for that.
But for a very specific and dated type of masculinity, this scene embodies that. And if you are attracted to masculine qualities, this is it.
Hot, wet, and dirty.
Wet, and dirty.
That should be the title of your book about this. Hot, wet, and dirty, a thesis on masculinity.
It's just me writing about Aragorn, who I think might be played by a man who's the same age as my father.
We're gonna fast forward 5 years from now. Here's a scene. Actually, I love this, but I don't think it should be 9,000 pages.
I could probably write 9,000 pages about Viggo Mortensen's portrayal as Aragorn.
So is it opening the doors?
I mean, it's not a scene.
Yeah.
I think it's probably it's the best like moment, like single shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, like that is iconic. It's hard, I think, to pick a single scene because
it's wet and dirty.
There are. It can be hard too. Who knows? I don't know your life. I think I'm gonna give it to. I think I'm going to give it to the final moments, to the Frodo and Sam.
Oh, the speech.
Frodo and Sam
Great
quiet moments. They don't make me cry, except in Return of the King, but they give me that feeling where you're about to cry. And that moment means a lot to me. And as an actor, it's something that I really respect because it's hard to play quiet. It's easy to play big and emotional and bombastic and hot and wet and dirty. It's not easy to do this. And I think at the heart of what Tolkien is trying to do, I think that's what it is. It's these moments between two characters. So I'm going to give it to the final scene. Jason, are you going to pick the scene that you talked about earlier of Theodred's grave?
I do love that scene,
Mm-hmm.
but my favorite scene is actually before that scene.
Okay.
My scene has a nice little
Eowyn's theme?
My scene is, I think it is a scene that is the microcosm of everything that works in Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
It has men being better.
Mm-hmm.
It has magic.
Mm-hmm.
It has big action. It has swords.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about a person stepping up to their destiny.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite scene is Aragorn, Gandalf, and the crew entering Theoden's hall and Theoden waking up.
You wouldn't deprive an old man of his walking stick.
Yes, because the fact of it has the trick of the wizardry. It has a fight scene in there. You get to see
Or gambling's like, I guess you could keep your stick. Okay.
You get to see magic. You get to see Theoden wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reason why this is my favorite scene is the last line. The line where Gandalf goes, "Your hand would feel better if it was grasping its sword."
Mm-hmm.
And then he raises the sword. It is
which is a beautifully designed sword as well.
And the music swells and you see everybody in the hall bow.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yes, this is what Lord of the Rings is about. Characters stepping up to their destiny, to their true purpose, and being pure of heart. Again, I'm a big sucker. We talked about it on this podcast so many times. I love Arthurian legends.
Yeah.
And Theoden is the King Arthur analog in this trilogy.
For sure.
And I love it. I mean,
as you evoked, he literally pulls a sword more or less from a stone.
I think the scene with his son is the saddest scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And I do love the Sam and Frodo scene at the end. Yeah. I love that scene so much. But I think when I'm thinking about what means the most Lord of the Rings, this was the scene. I can remember this scene in the theaters when I saw this scene, thinking to myself, oh, this is the new Star Wars.
And you're right.
Because with the first movie, you were like, oh, that's a really good movie, but are they going to be able to pull it off again? And when I saw this scene, I was like, wow, they're doing the first movie, but better. They have found a way to raise the quality. And it's knocking my socks off.
I would also like to make it very clear, if they had kept the Osgiliath flashback scene with Boromir and Faramir, that would have absolutely been my favorite scene.
Such a sad scene.
It's a beautiful scene.
Yep.
I also really love Aragorn's "Then I Shall Die" as one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The panic before the battle. But I think listening to everyone's favorite scene is very fascinating because I think we've gotten some insight into what we all see as the most important parts of
Hot,
this
wet,
movie.
and dirty.
Yeah.
Do we need to make that a t-shirt? Hot, wet, and dirty?
No one will buy it.
Put Smeagol on it.
Oh, hot, wet, and dirty.
Baby
Wait,
Smeagol.
Gollum, can you please say hot, wet, and dirty?
hot, wet, and dirty.
Oh my God.
That was so creepy. All right, Diego, let's get to the rating on a scale of 1 to 5 Brago intern cats, 5 being the best. Brago, the intern cat, is actually in the studio as we were speaking. What would you give Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers?
I would say it's a solid 4 out of 5 Bragos.
What makes it only a 4 out of 5?
So for me with these movies, they're all consistent in quality, and it's not a knock towards it. It's like, because I think you guys understand this, like a 5 is like perfect, right? And it's tough to get to something that's flawless. And for me, the way I rationalize it is just which one do you prefer? And for me, it's not, I love this movie. It's not my favorite one though. I prefer so if you were to ask me about Fellowship, I'd probably give that one the 0.5, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I give this movie all the accolades. The fact that it maintains its impressive consistency and quality for this trilogy. And I mean, yeah, it's a standout. It's really good. It's just more of like, it's not my favorite one, but I like this movie, or I love this movie a lot. It's really good, you know?
So Ashley, what would you give for your rating?
15? 125?
Well, the scale is only 5.
I mean, I am so biased with Lord of the Rings. I know for a lot of people, this is their favorite. It's not my favorite of the trilogy. That'll be next year or next week. Who knows? I think this is probably the most exciting installment. And I also think it's really, really hard to do a middle trilogy. And then the fact that we have to introduce even more concepts, characters, and complications than we had to in the first one. I think that's really quite something. So I don't know, 5 out of 5 Bragos.
Wow. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 Bragos as well. This is my favorite of the trilogy. This is the one that I would want to rewatch the most because I actually weirdly think it is the most complete of all of them. And the reason why I say that is because Fellowship of the Rings has a double climax when Gandalf dies and the end, and ends on a cliffhanger. I know these end on cliffhangers, but all of their storylines sort of get a conclusion. Like we solve Helm's Deep, we solve Saruman, and the Sam and Frodo think they solved Gollum. Yeah. Or they think they know the way to Mordor, and then, that's a little twisty. Whereas like Return of the King, to me, amazing ending. But like, again, it sort of has a weird prologue opening. Like, I don't know. I think because all 3 storylines are the most separate in this one, I think it's the reason why I think it's the strongest. And also, I think there, in terms of movie making, is a pre-Helm's Deep and a post-Helm's Deep.
I agree.
I think Helm's Deep is the best battle of this entire trilogy. I think Pelennor Fields is very CGI. Whereas
Pelennor Fields also takes place during the day, which it doesn't do it. I like Pelennor Fields better for me tonally, but like I understand your point. Like Helm's Deep is objectively better done.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I do think, again, I love Return of the King and I love Pelennor Fields, but I think there is no beating Helm's Deep. It is so like singular, powerful, and so well to understand that it's amazing. So that's why I give this a 5 out of 5. Well, everybody, that was The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. You can go check out our recommended reading on The Two Towers. It's going to be a lot of The Two Towers stuff. Ashley, where can they find that?
You can find that at geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. It's going to be all Tolkien all the time. All of the things that I recommend there, I will say, are things that I read, and they are the versions that I like the best.
Diego, thank you so much for joining us, and where can the good people find you online?
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. So on Twitter and Instagram, it's the same. It's BlackCrow521. You can follow me on there. I also have a YouTube channel that I don't post stuff there frequently, but occasionally I do have like an impulse need to create something. So I have a couple of video essays that I did last year. One on
how you did an essay on Margot Robbie.
Yes, I did a video essay on Margot Robbie. Yes, incredibly dorky, but it was very vulnerable. It was something. It's very genuine. I try to look in it, and not as just a guy with a crush on a beautiful woman, but just more of like looking at her as an artist and like examining all aspects of her career and breaking that down. So I do a deep dive on that, and then I also have a video essay on how Hispanic and Latino culture influence the arts and pop culture. If you guys are interested in checking any of that stuff out.
That's awesome. Everybody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What's the link of that YouTube channel?
That one is same as my Twitter and Instagram. It's BlackCrow521 as well.
Awesome. And we'll have links to those in the description of this episode. Ashley, where can they follow Geek History Lesson on social media?
You can find us at geekhistorylesson.com. Put a /blog on the end. We have a new post every Thursday to complete these podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter at GHL Podcast, on Geek History, on Instagram and Facebook at Geek History Lesson.
You can find Ashley on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Ashley V. Robinson. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Jawiin, and you can find me on TikTok at Jason Inman Writer. I post on there every once in a while. Now it's time for Stick Around. Question I'm going to ask all of you, and because we always do hashtag Stick Around because we thank you for sticking around through the plugs. Diego, where would you want to live in Middle Earth?
Ooh. If it's not the Shire, it might be Rohan, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Ashley, where would you live?
I think Hobbiton has a deep appeal, or Minas Tirith. Like it's the same duality that I deal with in this world. Like, do I want to live in a big city or do I want to live in the middle of nowhere?
I'm going with Rohan because the views are amazing.
Like Edoras, like the city, the capital city.
Like, think about the view you would have. Oh.
And the horses.
Well, I'll learn to love horses. I'll learn to love horses. I need to talk to Tex a little bit more.
Can I throw out a question for Stick Around?
Sure.
Without Googling.
Hold on. Stick around.
Thango you.
Part 2.
How many Academy Awards do you think this movie won?
Oh, 2 towers?
Yes.
Or the whole trilogy?
2 towers.
Diego, you go ahead, sir.
4?
Jason.
I know Return of the King like won 11 or 12.
Return of the King won 13. Thank you so much.
I knew Return of the King cleared. So I'm actually going to say 3.
Interesting.
Because I think Return of the King got all they robbed this one, I think.
I mean, so I think we all know that like Return of the King really ran away with everything. This movie was nominated for 6 of them.
Whoa, even that seems low.
And it's really funny because when you Google it, it comes up as if they won all 6 of them. They did not. They won 2.
Oh.
They won Best Sound Editing and Best Visual Effects, but they were nominated in addition to for Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Art Direction, and Best Picture.
So I was correct. They were waiting for the finale.
Yeah.
All right, that's typical.
And
of the Oscars.
We will talk more about that next week, next year, tomorrow. Who knows?
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Geek History Lesson on the 2 Towers. I hope you enjoyed all the horse talk. Diego, thanks again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. This is unreal for me to be a fan for you guys for 5 years and then to be here with you guys. I thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well,
to be
it's
here.
only because you're an awesome friend and you're an awesome Mind University student and you're an awesome assistant. So that's why we wanted to invite you on. Hey, you are the first, I think. Well, no, we've had other people, but I think you're the first like fan that we've had on the episode. But you're not a fan anymore. You're a writer in your own right, and you make awesome YouTube videos. So that's all that matters. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Geek History Lesson. I'm Jason Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And research assistant and writer Diego Nunez. Will you please dismiss the class?
Class is now dismissed.